dafür zu sorgen, dass Frieden und Freiheit zurückkehren nach Europa, dass wir einen Ausgleich finden, endlich auch wieder mit unserem größten europäischen Nachbarn, nämlich mit Russland. Und ich sage das nicht, weil ich hier im Osten bin, das sage ich an jeder anderen Stelle in Deutschland auch. Russland ist ein europäisches Land. Wenn es uns dann gelingt, in der längeren Perspektive mit Russland wieder einen Ausgleich zu finden, wenn Frieden herrscht, wenn Freiheit gewährleistet ist, wenn uns das alles gelingt, meine Damen und Herren, dann hat diese Europäische Union, dann haben wir auch in der Bundesrepublik Deutschland eine weitere Bewährungsprobe bestanden und dann können wir auch über das Jahr 2026 hinaus mit großer Zuversicht nach vorn blicken. Ich wünsche uns das. Ich bin mir sicher, dass es gelingt. Tragen Sie dazu bei. Ich wünsche Ihnen und uns allen ein gutes Jahr 2026.
Europe's diplomatic freeze on Moscow may be cracking, and the shift is coming from Berlin. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is now urging the European Union to rebalance relations with Russia, a sharp reversal from his earlier refusal to engage President Vladimir Putin. The statement lands like a political thunderclap inside a bloc that has spent nearly 3 years isolating Moscow over the Ukraine war. Tonight, Europe's unity narrative is being tested, and the implications could reshape the continent's future beyond 2026. Since February 2022, most EU member states have pursued a strategy of isolating Russia following the escalation of the Ukraine conflict. That approach has sidelined Brussels from peace talks, as negotiations were instead launched last year by US President Donald Trump. As Washington took the diplomatic lead, Europe found itself watching from the margins, politically aligned but strategically absent. Now, cracks are emerging in that isolation-first policy, with key European capitals openly calling for renewed dialogue with Moscow. Speaking on Wednesday, Chancellor Merz said the EU must find a balance again with our largest European neighbor. He added that if peace is achieved and relations stabilized, Europe could look ahead with great confidence beyond 2026.
And if we can then still manage to ensure that peace and freedom return to Europe, that we finally find a balance once again with our largest European neighbor, namely Russia. And I'm not saying this because I'm here in the East. I say this in every other place in Germany too. Russia is a European country. If we manage in the longer term to re-establish a balance with Russia, when peace prevails, when freedom is guaranteed, if we succeed in all of this, ladies and gentlemen, then this European Union and we in Germany will have passed another crucial test, and then we can look forward with great confidence beyond 2026. This is my wish for us. I am confident that it will succeed. Please contribute to its success. I wish you and all of us a very good year 2026.
The words mark a striking change from Merz's position last summer when he dismissed direct contact with Moscow as pointless. At the time, he said he would refrain from calling President Putin, signaling a hardline stance that mirrored Brussels' dominant view. Now, that stance appears to be softening under geopolitical pressure. Merz is not alone. The European Commission's chief spokesperson, Paola Pino, recently acknowledged that talks with President Putin would eventually be unavoidable. Her comment, delivered carefully, nonetheless broke with years of public reluctance from the EU's executive arm.
Unfortunately, we're not seeing any signs by President Putin to be engaging in such talks. So we're not there yet. But at some point, we would hope indeed that there will be some such talks that will finally lead to peace in Ukraine.
In Paris, President Emmanuel Macron has gone further, calling for a proper restart of discussions with Moscow over Ukraine. Macron said it would once again become useful to speak directly with Vladimir Putin, signaling a pragmatic shift in tone.
Is it useful to talk to Vladimir Putin today?
I think it will become useful again to talk to Vladimir Putin, yes.
In any case, I noticed that there are people speaking with Vladimir Putin.
So I personally believe that we Europeans
And Ukrainians, it's in our interest to find the right framework to properly re-engage this discussion. Otherwise, we talk among ourselves with negotiators who go alone to discuss with the Russians. This is not optimal. So I think we must finish this ongoing session, if I may say. There will be discussions in the next few hours to see what progress has been made. A cycle is underway. If a robust, lasting peace with all the required guarantees can be achieved, that's great. And in any case, we will then sit down at the table with everyone. Well, it would be necessary for continuing to finance, to commit, to resist, and to assist Ukraine. It will also be essential in the coming weeks to find the ways and means for Europeans in good organization, re-engage in a full dialogue with Russia and complete transparency and in association with Ukraine.
The Kremlin has taken note. Spokesman Dmitry Peskov confirmed that President Putin remains open to dialogue with his French counterpart. However, Peskov issued a clear warning, saying talks must focus on understanding each other's positions, not delivering lectures. Italy has now added its voice to the growing chorus. Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni publicly backed Macron's outreach, declaring that the time has come for Europe to talk to Russia. Meloni also proposed appointing a dedicated EU special envoy for Ukraine, aiming to strengthen the bloc's role in negotiations.
They have announced that they hope the decree with which Italy supports Ukraine annually does not get Parliament's approval. Regardless of how this will turn out, there will also have to be a vote, evidently perhaps on Article 5. Regardless of how this vote turns out, and I ask you, don't these positions risk weakening or worse, influencing your work in international forums? And then, if I may, Salvini has expressed hope that Italy will be the first country to build and rebuild the bridges with Russia. I ask you if you agree with this and if you also agree that Russia should rejoin the G8.
Evidently it was not so groundless. Well, look, I clearly listened to all the evaluations that come from the majority. I have also read of someone hoping that the Ukraine aid decree would not receive the votes. I don't think it will go that way, and as I have already said, I would consider it a mistake. It particularly surprises me. Especially that it comes from a general, precisely for the reasoning I made earlier on the topic of deterrence. Soldiers are the first to understand how essential the armed forces are for building peace. Or are essential for building peace and not, let's say, simply for making war. After that, regarding Russia in the G8 and contacts with Putin, Salvini made a reflection on Italy's relations, just as Macron did, for example, on relations with Europe, in the sense that, and in this, let's say, beyond what Italian relations are, because we are in a context that also involves cooperation. On cooperation, the European Union, I think, however, that Macron is right on this. That is, I believe the time has come for Europe to also speak with Russia, because if Europe decides to be part of this phase of negotiations by speaking only to one of the two sides involved, I fear that in the end, it will see that the positive contribution it can make is limited. After that, though, where is the issue in this? The issue is who should do it, because if we made the mistake of deciding on one hand to reopen dialogues with Russia and on the other hand to proceed in a disorganized manner while doing so, we would be doing a favor to Putin, and the last thing I want to do in life is a favor to Putin. In life is a favor to Putin. We have had this problem since the beginning of the negotiations. There are many voices speaking, there are many formats that exist. It is the reason why I have always been in favor of the appointment of a special envoy for Europe. On the Ukrainian issue, that is, a person who would allow us to synthesize but to speak with one voice, this is the real issue that puts us in difficulty. After that, relations with Italy, Russia in the G7, what will happen in the future, we'll discuss this when we have a path to peace, that is, when we have peace, but I'll tell you more, we'll also talk about it based on what the conditions are under which peace is achieved. So for now, it seems absolutely premature to me. Today it would seem to me the entry of Russia into the G7, for example, is impossible. After that, these are all topics that will arise when and if there is a peace, and I repeat, also based on how it is achieved, under what conditions it is achieved.